just discuss what we found that year. But I'm just going to run through really briefly what we actually found throughout the first year that we dug as well. So just to give you an idea of where we're located, the area we're located where the excavations were held, it's kind of the south central Burren area. It's kind of just kind of south of where Newville Church is. So you can see the location of the two sites. The one we excavated in 2022 was actually in the townland of Lismoher. And then you can see we came back and we did another second phase of excavation in 2023, which is actually just in the neighbouring townland of Ballyganner North. And we actually went back to Ballyganner North again as part of the third phase of excavation in 2024. So you can see the 3 years of excavation is really just in this very small area. These sites are actually only about 400 meters apart, so they're very close. So just to kind of give you a quick so here's you can see that it's a dense area full of archaeological monuments. We've got cashels, we've got cairns, burial cairns, and we've got hut sites and all sorts of and a big intensive field system in the area. So it's a real area rich of archaeological features and monuments. So it's a fantastic area to be digging. So I'll just show you, this is the site at Lismoher, which was part of the phase one. And this was the first year we went out digging, and you can see it was just a small kind of circular hut site that had basically a stone wall, kind of a moundy kind of stone wall around it. Again, this wasn't very large. It had about an internal diameter of about 8 meters. And you can see the kind of stuff that we found. I've already talked about this site before, so I really won't go into it in too much details, but you can see we had a few iron artifacts, we have some worked bone that came out of the site. We had a couple of wet stones, and then we obviously had this lovely blue kind of glass kind of toggle that we found. And just currently at the moment, a lot of our artifacts have gone to the specialists, and some of the material is actually starting to come back. But I will give a talk when all the post-ex material comes back, so we get the full kind of picture for this site. But we have currently just got one radiocarbon date that we found from a layer inside the enclosure, and it gave us a date of 6 to 650 AD. So you're looking at early 7th century, early medieval period. So that was really interesting. But we are actually going to send more material for radiocarbon dating. So it'll be interesting to see if we get similar dates or something slightly different. So after we excavated that first site, we found a lot of information, but we also kind of had more questions than we had answers then afterwards. But that is usually what happens when you start digging. You think you'll go out and answer all your questions, but then sometimes more questions come up. So I decided to go back again for a second phase of excavation. And this time, you can see in Ballyganner North, just kind of within the neighbouring farmer's field, he actually had 2 of these very similar hut sites. Now, one was slightly larger, 14 kind of meters in diameter, and there was a smaller one, very similar to what we excavated in 2022, which was only 10.5 meters in diameter. So it was kind of very similar to the one over in Lismoher. So I decided I was very decided to really just go for it, and we would dig 2 trenches through both the hut sites to see what we could find. If we were looking at very similar material to what we found on the first year's excavation, or we'd be looking at something different. And the fact that these 2 hut sites were kind of a different size, I was wondering would there be different activities within the 2 of them. So you can just see from this lovely area photo, you can see with a lovely long trench 1, and then the second trench was through the smaller hut site, and it's just over here. So I'm just going to show you trench 2 really quickly. We didn't find a huge amount in trench 2. We did find obviously the enclosing wall, but again, that has slipped an awful lot. So we didn't have a huge amount of artifacts. Now we did find stuff. We did find chert pieces and some iron pieces and shale pieces. So again, not too dissimilar to what we found at Lismoher. And we did get some animal bone, and we have very little charcoal, but we do have material for radiocarbon dating, which we haven't sent off just yet. get for this one. So this will be very interesting to see. Is it contemporary with the first year's Liz Moher's site? But it was quite similar in relation to the kind of the archaeological layer that we found on the inside. But really, a lot of the activity happened in Trench 1, which was through that larger hut site. Or enclosure really is what we should be calling them, because they're identified as hut sites, but they're actually, it's hard to say if they were actually structures. So we'll just briefly go through Trench 1, which was excavated in 2023. And you can see that we actually have some radiocarbon dates. Now I'm going to show you the radiocarbon dates now, and then I will bring them up a bit again later. So I just wanted to show you that we had 2 radiocarbon dates. You can see them there in pink, and this is where they came from. One of them came from a pit, and the other one came from an animal bone under the enclosing wall. And what was really interesting about these dates is that they came back as Iron Age. So we're looking at 2 dates that are from the 4th to one date that's from the 4th to 2nd century BC, and then the other date is kind of 2nd to 2nd century BC to 1st century AD. So these are really in the Iron Age period. And then what we did have, if anyone has seen my previous one from 2023, we do have a date for the flexed burial that we found, and that is a much later date. That is not associated with the Iron Age period. It's actually medieval, and it came back at like 700 to 880 AD. So it's somewhere in around the 8th and 9th century. So that's actually the medieval period. So just to explain the Iron Age dates and the burials that we had on the site, there's about 1,000 years gap between them, 800 to 1,000 year gap between them. So you're looking at completely different activity on the site. The Iron Age activity being there before, a long time before the burials, before that flex burial was placed in. So there's a big gap in the time period and the use of this site. So just to give you an idea, just to explain the pit, when we excavated Trench 1, because we had a finding burial activity, and we actually had so much archaeology, we actually didn't get the full of Trench 1 excavated that year in 2023. So we did actually go back. That's why we came back in 2024. But I just want to show you the pit that we did find in 2023. It was just a simple kind of oval shaped pit. Now we weren't able to excavate it fully because it actually extended beyond our bulk. So half of the pit is actually still, well, a part of the pit, not really half of it, but a part of the pit is still intact under the ground. And we saved all the soil from that pit, and that's where we got our radiocarbon date. We dated some bone from the very base of that pit. So that pit, I will come back to it again a little bit later, but just to kind of give you an idea, it's just very, very interesting because there's very few Iron Age dates in the Burren, and this is kind of significant for that period to find Iron Age activity in the Burren. So it is brilliant. So I'll just show you as well briefly, if you have seen the flex burial that we had on the site as well. So you can see the flex burial itself. It was actually, if you look at it from left to right, it was actually under a kind of a loose layer of a small kind of cairn of stones that obviously, and you can see these lovely big stones were actually placed around the outside of it. And then the burial then was inside, was just underneath that, very shallow underneath. And you can see it was kind of they're not classified as crouch burials, but they're actually called flex burials. That's where the knees and the legs are kind of flexed and bent. But I will come back to this in a few minutes, just in relation to the other burials that we had. So that was kind of some of the main activity from Trench 1. And we did actually find infant remains on the site, but they were actually outside the enclosure. So just to kind of just run through really quickly the artifacts that we found, because once we kind of had excavated Trench 1, we kind of knew what to expect when we went back in 2024. So we had a good few flint lithics, chert lithics, which we now know possibly date to the Bronze Age, which now adds a whole new period to our site. And we had shale pieces, we had wet stones, a chert arrowhead, a spindle whorl, and shale nodules. Now, I just want to explain why these all are quite significant, because some of these are just look like pieces of random stones, but we're kind of in a landscape. We're in a limestone landscape. So these shale pieces and these kind of sandstone pieces, that we picked up on the excavation are not natural to the area. So there's stones that have been brought to the site and maybe left there. Do you know what I mean? Maybe they had a function of some sort, but they're not naturally occurring stones that we find on the site or even in the locality. They've been brought to our site. So the iron artifacts that we had a couple of nails, and possibly a knife, and then we found a lovely socketed arrowhead. And then we did find some lovely kind of pieces of like maybe associated with jewelry or ornament, personal ornament. We have a green glass bead, we have a quartz bead, and then we've two lovely bone toggles. And what was interesting about these bone toggles is that they were found at completely opposite ends of the site, but they were found within the interior. And then we got this beautiful blue glass toggle. So that was really, really pretty. So just to kind of give you an idea, so that's kind of trench one. So a lot of information, a lot of material was collected. We did get, charcoal, and we did get environmental stuff that we've kept, and we did get lots of animal bone as well. So we do have a lot of other kind of organic material that we have, and then all of that's going to go to the specialists. That is all hopefully going to be kicking off pretty soon. So we went back in 2024 with the aim to kind of finish excavating trench one. And what we had found in trench one was that after we'd found the first cairn of stones with the flex burial underneath, there was actually a second cairn of stones that we found. So if you see where my arrow is, that's where the second cairn, and we didn't get that excavated obviously in 2023. So we decided to come back 2024 and excavate it. And within the last week of 2023, we did find a second burial on the site. Well, actually, sorry, a third burial on the site. It was actually, and what we could tell was that it was an extended burial. That's where the individual is lying straight and on their back. So we did decide that in 2024, we would come back and excavate these features. Firstly, to confirm if there was a second burial under the cairn, and then to look at the extended burial and get a date for that, because again, you had two different burial kind of different burial traditions on the site. So it would be interesting to find out if they're actually contemporary or from a different period of time. So just to give you an idea, so this is just to show you there, trench one is in blue. So that's what we excavated in 2023. And here's trench three is what's in red, and that's what we excavated in 2024. So you can see there's actually quite a lot of activity that we found in 2024. So my aim was for 2024, obviously, was to finish trench one, and I had hoped that we might find more features like pits and stuff similar to that first pit that we found in 2023. And you can see from the drawing there that there is actually a good bit of activity that we found on the site. So obviously we had the extended burial that we knew from 2023 and the cairn. We found an additional 5 pit features, all within the interior of the enclosure. And then we did find a 4th burial on the site, which was another flexed burial. And this was within an oval pit. And then just to kind of explain then we did find on the exterior outside, so this outside the enclosure on the east side, which is just over here, we did find a layer of stones, an archaeological layer of stones, and these kind of slab stones forming a possible slab surface. So there was a lot of stuff going on the exterior of the enclosure on the east side as well. But actually, just to give you an idea, we didn't find anything on the western side. So so that was just kind of very interesting. So when I talk about the eastern side, I'm just talking about this side. And as you said, we didn't really find anything outside the enclosure on the western side. So just to show you the cairn that we had found obviously in 2023, and we excavated it. And of course, we found there to be no burial underneath it. So that was interesting, completely on its own, because it just tells a story as to what it was doing there. And again, I have multiple interpretations of it, but again, we didn't find a burial underneath. So that's, again, archaeology always surprises you when you think you know what you're going to find, and then you don't. It gives you something different. I'm going to move on to the extended burial. The 4 burials. So just to kind of give you a brief down on between trench 1 and trench 3 of the 2 years excavating in the larger of the enclosures, we did find 4 burials in total. We did find infant remains in 2023, and that was outside the burial, outside the enclosure, sorry, and that's up here. You can see it's skeleton C20. So just to give you an idea, it was very, very young individual. We're not too sure of an age yet, but we were able to tell that we were able to tell the location of the head to possibly the legs, and that it just had a north-northwest to south-southeast orientation, with the head at the north-northwest side. Then the flexed burial, obviously this yellow one, which was the one that was under the cairn of stones. This individual was lying in an east-west direction with the head to the east facing south, and the hands then were placed up under the chin. I'm going to show you a picture again in a little while of that. So the next few photos, just to let you know, are going to be burials and skeleton remains. So that's the one that we know we have a date for. So this yellow one down here, and we know that that's 8th, 9th century AD. So again, an early medieval date. Then we found obviously the extended burial that we knew was there, and that was lying in an east-west direction. So similar to the again, kind of same direction as the flex burial, but this time the head was to the west and the feet were to the east. And just to give you an idea, the right arm was bent with the hand on the shoulder. So you can imagine their right arm was just bent, but placing its hand up, just if you bent your arm and placed your hand up on top of your shoulder. And then the left arm was kind of bent slightly across the chest. So that was really interesting. We didn't find any grave goods with either of those, the first flex burial or the extended burial. And then our fourth burial then that we found, which was here in C49 in the blue one, and that was again another flexed burial, which in a pit, again lying in an east-west direction, but in completely the opposite direction as the first flex burial. This time the head was to the west and the person was facing north, where the previous flex burial, the head was to the east and the individual was facing south. So just to go back, sorry, to this one that we found in 2024, the left arm was bent with the hand under the chin, and the right arm was in a very unusual kind of position. It was actually placed kind of crossing over the body. So possibly the two hands may have been placed together. And then just to, which I'm going to show you a picture shortly, you'll see what I mean, is that the legs were crossing as well. So this individual was the legs were crossing at the knee, and again then at the ankle. So that just kind of gives you the details. I'm going to show you the pictures of the burials now. So here is the extended burial. And you can see that it's obviously along, and the individual was placed in their back. And this was within a very, very shallow grave cut. I'd say really at the very most, it might have been about 15 centimeters deep. And again, so it's not very far. And you can imagine the limestone and cutting into this wasn't very easy. So that's actually probably why it's quite shallow. So you can see then, and if you can just see the details of the arm, that's the right arm there. And you can see it's just placed up under the chin. And then their left arm is just crossing over just onto their chest. So the hands are kind of doing something like kind of this, if you can see my image. I'm not sure if you can. So then just to move on to the other, so this was the other burial then from 2024 that we excavated. And you can see that it was actually, it's very hard to see this, but there is actually a feature here. If you look at the left photograph, we did start identifying that there was something going on amongst the stones. And you can see this is what it looked like as we started excavating it out. And it wasn't long before we realized there was another burial inside of this. So this is the other burial that we found, another flex burial. So you can see what was very interesting about this is that this pit was actually quite large, and the individual was actually placed kind of in the kind of southeast corner of this pit. They weren't placed in the center. It was just kind of off to the side. And you can see what I mean by the actually, I think the next one is a bit better. Yeah, sorry. You can see what I mean, that the left arm here was just bent, placed, and the hand looks like it was kind of up over, around near the chin. That's where we're finding the finger bones. And you can see the right arm is coming across the face. And then just to kind of explain the legs here, you can see that the left leg is you know, and the right leg is just here, that they're crossed, and then the legs cross again at the ankles. So that's a really interesting burial, and it's kind of, it's very different to the, it's similar to that first flex burial, but again, just different. And again, as I said, they were kind of in completely the opposite directions. We did find this lovely piece of, it's an iron artifact of some sort, and that would seem to be placed on top of the ribs of this individual. So there was to find a little artifact, which is now is kind of interesting, because we didn't get anything with the other two burials or with the infant remains. So I just wanted to show you these two burials together, just to show you the two pictures so you can see where they are. They're kind of quite central on into the site. You know, so this one is the one from 2023. So the burials themselves, even though the individuals seem to be slightly similar, but just in the opposite directions of how they place the individual, but they are different because one had a cairn of stones underneath and the other individual was actually placed within a pit. Now, just to explain though, that the pit was well sealed with large stones on top, because it was actually kind of hard to see it. It took us quite a good few times to clean it to realize that there was something actually underneath these stones. So they had plate, but not in the same kind of way that the cairn of stones that we found from 2020, from 2023. So I just wanted to show you again, just the two. This is, if you imagine north is to the top, I meant to put it a north arrow to show you. If you'd imagine north is up here to at the top of the screen, and it just shows you the difference between the two individuals. So just to go back again to our dates. So like, just to remind you again that at the moment we have only one date for the flex burial, and that's of obviously early medieval. And you can see then, if I just bring us back then to those Iron Age dates, you can see the big gap between them. So you are looking at 8 to 1,000 years between those kind of, that Iron Age date that I've got. So I have 2 Iron Age dates for the site, and at the moment only one date for the burials, for the burial. So just to kind of bring you back then to the pit. So here's my pit again, my Iron Age pit. So what's really interesting about the 5 pits then that we found, I've just shown them all here in yellow, is the kind of contextual information we were able to get from these while we were excavating. So we did not find the pits until we had actually removed that cairn. So we know that pit 45 and 51 are earlier than that second cairn of stone that we found. So that means those pits were there before that second cairn of stone came in. We also know then that pit 52, that has an interesting, that pit was there before the extended burial went in. So that pit is earlier than that extended burial, because the extended burial actually cut part of that pit C52. So that means C52 was sitting there, and then in comes the burial later. So we are looking at activity that's looking very possibly, hopefully, that some of these pits may actually be possibly of Iron Age date. There was 1 or 2 of them that the fills, which means the soil inside in the pits, were very similar to what we found in the pit in C24, which was the pit that we found in 2023. So the soils were kind of similar, with 2 of the features at least. But just to give you an idea, the pits themselves were what we kind of classify as single filled pits. So that means they just had a single fill in them. What we do in archaeology, we try and find different layers by looking at the different soil changes that happens. But these pits look like they had been opened and then not left open for very long, and then filled in pretty quick. So they didn't have any silting or anything in the bottom of them, which might happen sometimes if a pit is left open and it's rained for a bit and the water is obviously coming in, and natural silt will build up at the base of the pit. We didn't have any of that. So it looks like that they were opened and then filled in pretty quick. They did have large stones placed in them. There was a little bit of animal bone in them and some charcoal, but not a huge amount. But we do have enough to radiocarbon date each one of these. And I'm just going to show you, this is kind of what the pits looked like in the kind of landscape. So they were found within the interior of the enclosure, and you can see there's a pit here in the foreground. So this was like pit C59, if you can see it on my map there. It's kind of like, it's not a circular pit, it's kind of a oblong kind of I don't want to say like rectangular in shape, but it had a very unusual shape to it. And it seems to have, and that had very large stones inside in the pit. We had a lovely circular pit, which was over here, and that also had very large stones in it. And that soil was very similar to the soil that we excavated from the first pit in 2023. And then we had a very small pit, C45, as well. So you can see the kind of features that are kind of coming up on the site. That's, if you just look further over here, that's where the burial was, the fourth burial we found on the site, and then there was another pit at the other side of the enclosure. So it's all very kind of telling a story of what's going on the site. And this is just what the pits look like. They don't photograph very well. I tried my best to get photos of them, but they're kind of hard thing to photograph. But you can see just kind of what they looked like. So, you know, again, hopefully we might be looking at maybe some of them are related to maybe Iron Age activity. The pit, this lovely pit, this was a very shallow pit, and this was under the cairn, that second cairn of stones that we found. It had a lovely blue, sorry, not blue, a bone toggle inside in it. And so that's a really, really good, secure, and we'll be able to date that pit and be able to date, hopefully, that bone toggle. So just to kind of jump now to kind of, we're just about to finish, and these are really all about the archaeological layers. So really, this site really gave us great context, you know, lots of activity of layers, and layers that we were able to tell different stories and different times of period, hopefully using radiocarbon date to assist us. So we were able to draw great sections showing the relationships between the different layers that we were excavating on the site. But I just wanted to show you the outside on the eastern side of the site. So this is actually, if we're kind of looking at this is us coming from the eastern side, we're looking at the site, and we're actually outside the structure. What we did find outside was this very large, we had a very kind of, it's almost like you can see it here under these large, under the enclosing wall. It was a deep layer of almost about half a meter, just shy of a half a meter deep. It had lots of stones, kind of small sized stones, fist sized, with lots of kind of a lovely rich kind of soil in it. And it had lots of animal bone in it. And again, and some charcoal in it. And this layer, we know because we took a section through the enclosing wall, goes underneath the wall. So this layer is actually earlier than possibly the enclosing wall. So we got some really lovely material and, you know, animal bone and some charcoal to actually date this layer. So it'll be very exciting to find out and to see the sequence of where this layer fits on our site. And the other thing that we found, just you can see it here, this kind of layer is kind of C55. It was kind of a layer of flat slabs. Now they weren't like fantastic flat slabs. Like these are kind of obviously naturally picked stones, and they were kind of laying on their flat side. And we were able, the layer we had found was actually underneath these flat slabs. So we know that that layer C43 that goes under the wall is also underneath these slabs. So it's one of the earliest possible layers on the site. And what was really interesting about the flat slabs, when we took a section through our enclosing wall, which was here, we found that those flat slabs go underneath these large stones and comes out the other side. So again, really interesting to think about the context of the site, and that we can identify earlier layers on the site. And it'll be really good when we get radiocarbon dates to come back to tell us what date these layers are. And it might be, I don't know if we'll ever be able to get anything to confirmly date when the enclosing wall went in, but we now will be able to date this layer that's underneath that wall and maybe tell us when this layer went in, and then at some point then the enclosing wall went in afterwards. So, you know, it's again like a lot of have to wait for radiocarbon dates to come back and to send material, but again, in the next year now we should be getting a lot of that information back to us. So I just wanted to run through the lithics, or the finds that we found. So as we'd already excavated Trench 1, we kind of knew what to look out for when we were excavating Trench 3. And I can tell you now, the volunteers did a great job. I don't think anything passed them by. We sieved everything on the site like we did. And you can see the kind of lithics. We got more lithics. Church, and we got church, and we got flint ones as well. And then we got this lovely church arrowhead. So we've had someone really briefly look at these, and it looks like these are actually Bronze Age in date. So that's like before the Iron Age. So we are looking at an additional period of time where there was activity on the site. but that activity might have been there long before before the Iron Age activity happened, so it just kind of give you an idea that maybe there was Bronze Age habitation in the area, and then Iron Age activity occurred on the site on top of the Bronze Age. And again, then we know that we definitely have medieval burials as well on the site. So we did find some iron artifacts, not a huge amount, just kind of little bits of what might be kind of classified as everyday items, like pins and points and stuff. We did find more whetstones. So just in case I hadn't mentioned, whetstones are sharpening stones used for sharpening kind of knives and tools. So they're kind of like an everyday item. We did find another spindle whorl, which was brilliant because now we've like 2 from the site. We found a few bone points, which we never found in 2023. So that was really interesting because we've actually 3 of these from the site in 2024. And again, we found another bone toggle, but you can see this one is actually different to the other 2 we found. This one actually looks like it's been polished because you can see it's quite shiny. So it'll be really interesting and we know because we found this in a pit that we'll be able to actually date that pit and be able to date when this bone toggle, what period this came from. We did find again more stone finds on the site. We found kind of shale pieces, we found water roll stones, similar stuff to what we found in 2023. And again, stuff that is being brought to the site. And we found this very large shale piece that was actually found in one of the pits. And actually we also found something else with that I'll show you in a minute. And these kind of shale nodules. So again, and we found this lovely big piece of granite on the site as well. So again, like things that just, they're not coming from the locality, and they're coming in from somewhere else. People are bringing them to the site. So just to show you, then we found these beautiful. These were kind of maybe like the top end finds of the site, along kind of again maybe more ornament because we have a copper spiral ring. So this was beautiful. One of the volunteers had found it. Now it's a very, very small ring. I don't know, is it a ring for your finger, or is it a ring? Maybe it's just could be a functional ring for something to do with cattle or something like that. We're not really too sure, but I'd say it could be an ornamental ring. Sorry, I've gone ahead of myself. And then we found this lovely tweezers, a copper tweezers. You can see it there. I mean, just a fantastic find to get. Just kind of, I suppose, somebody was tweezing, and I suppose evidence of cleaning body hair, maybe, who knows. But again, just 2 really, really nice finds, and again just adding a mixture of finds to what we had found in Trench the first year we dug on this site, and how much more we found in 2024. The other thing we found this was in the pit with that very large piece of shale. We found a single dog whelk. I don't know what this lad is doing there, but we found just 1 dog whelk. And actually, when we found the 1 dog whelk, I thought, oh my God, we'll find loads of more seashells. We actually just found the single dog whelk, and that was found in one of the pits. So I just wanted to show you, because there's our site in purple, and about how far away we are from the sea. So this dog whelk making it to our site is how it got there. Obviously somebody brought it, but just to show you how far it's traveled in to get to our site. So I just want to show you some pictures of volunteers. These are the Burrenbeo Trust Conservation Volunteers who were, they've done the 3 years excavating now with me. So we went out, just to give you an idea, for 3 weeks. It's full time, and it's not easy at times to be out excavating and doing, but I just really want to say thanks a million. The volunteers were just absolutely brilliant. We did have the osteologist from AMS come out, Mara, who gave us a talk about the work that she does, and she came out and looked at some of the burial remains. So she'll be actually analysing all of that afterwards. So she gave a talk to the volunteers in 2024. We did have a couple of people visit the site. The National Monuments came out, who granted me my licence. We had a couple of members of the Royal Irish Academy who came out. So we are funded under the Royal Irish Academy, so they came to visit us, and a couple of NUIG came out, and a couple of the Baker's Burn Aaron team and Burrenbeo Trust came out themselves to see the site. So I just really want to acknowledge the landowners, the McGann family and the Hines family, for the support that they've shown me over the 3 years excavating. Because again, as I said, you can't do this work without permission from the landowners. and the support that we got from both the McGann family and the Hines family has just been absolutely brilliant. Because like farmers and the landowners really are the custodians of the monuments, and without them allowing us to do this, we would not have found the wealth of archaeological information that we found during these 3 years excavating. And I just want to acknowledge that Terry McGann passed away there. He left us there last year, and Terry was I just really enjoyed my time getting to know Terry, and the support he's shown me, and his family have just been fantastic as well. So just to kind of acknowledge the importance of landowners and the farmers to these archaeological projects, because really without them and their support, we wouldn't be able to investigate these kind of wonderful sites and adding to the archaeological record of Ireland and the Burren without their support. So really just a huge thanks to both these families and to Terry. And just to also thank the Royal Irish Academy for the funding of the excavations over the 3 years. We wouldn't, again, it was great to get that kind of funding, and they've now granted me post-ex funding. So now all the material is going to get analysed. And then to the Burrenbeo Trust, there's a fantastic support, and Burren Conservation Volunteers, because again, wouldn't have been able to do the work without their help on the site. Then to the National Monuments, who granted me the license to excavate, and our Field Monument Advisor program is actually funded now under the National Monument Service. So again, it's just fantastic to have this support. And then to the Acres Burren Aaron Group, which is the farming scheme that I do a good bit of work with, and to AMS, the Archaeological Management Solutions team, for their support as well of the project. So thanks very much. I think I have everybody in. Anyway.
Thank you very much, Elaine. That was amazing. You encapsulated a whole lot in a very short space of time, almost 3 years of worth of work. So thank you for that, and wonderful insight into all the work that you've been doing. I remember asking you at one of the walks, if you had your choice of excavations in the Burren, what kind of site would you choose? Would it be like a Paul na Brown, or what kind of care? And I know you had mentioned that you're interested in what seem like regular hut sites or domestic sites. And do you think this fulfilled that kind of criteria? Is this why you were drawn to this site?
Yes, well, that's it. Yeah, I suppose I I'll always be very honest. I'd only recently gotten my license, so as a director, and I didn't want to take on a project that would be beyond my capabilities. And I felt that I like domestic stuff. I like finding the everyday, where the everyday people are, and what people would be doing every day, rather, what I mean? That's just kind of the things that kind of draw me in. So that's why I kind of picked these sites, and because I've actually found kind of a few more of them over the years, and I always said to myself, what are they, and what is their function? So yeah, like there's again, I'm still a bit miffed by them. And the post-ex will really show us a lot more about what these sites are, and who knows, maybe down the road I might have to do a bit more excavating. But again, as you can see, what happened with one of what we classified as a hut site, I suppose they really are kind of enclosures. We're not really too sure what they are. The one on it really kind of, it really challenged me as an archaeologist, to the recording that we had to do. And but again, we just found some amazing stuff. I didn't expect to find what we did, and the wealth of information that we can now add to the archaeological record for the Burren area. So again, I would like to do more of these hut sites in the future, I think.
And Elaine, what's the difference between an enclosure and a hut site?
Well, I suppose we're not. We kind of I suppose we're not really too sure sometimes what the functions of these sites are, and we kind of base enclosures are kind of slightly larger than what we would say a hut site would be, and hut sites are normally quite smaller, maybe about 5 to 6 meters in diameter. So and when we kind of think of a hut site, we do think of a structure, and we do think of somewhere where somebody was living in. But when we kind of say an enclosure, it might have been something, it was enclosing something. It doesn't necessarily mean it was a house, but it was something that might have been enclosing some sort of activity. So I thought that what we might be looking at were house sites, some sort of house sites, but I don't think that that's what we might be looking at. I do think we're looking at something that's enclosing activity that was happening inside them. So I do think they're just very small enclosures, but I don't think that we're looking at like what we would classify as a house, that we're looking at a wooden structure with, you know, a wattling and all that sort of stuff. I don't think that that's what these are, and it's not looking like that that's what's going on here. But I think they're enclosing these sort of small enclosures that are kind of having activity on the inside. And then just to remind you, whether the enclosure wall itself is associated with the Iron Age activity or associated with the burials, it's a little bit hard to know just at this moment of time. But just to remind you that there's a big gap between these activities from the Bronze Age activity of the lithics and stuff to the Iron Age. There's a big gap between them. So we are looking at kind of different phases of activity on the site. So it might not be able to ever confirm exactly what the enclosing wall and what date it is, you know, but that's okay. It's,
Yeah,
you know,
you're sticking to the facts and what we know as
sticking
opposed
to
to
the facts and what we
a
know
lot
at the
of
moment, and
um
just and waiting on the radiocarbon dates. So the two
yeah,
burials from 2024 we have sent off to get dated. I had hoped we might get them back, but it won't be till about March now. So I wouldn't assume just yet that they're exactly all contemporary, the burials. So we'll have to wait and see to be
yeah,
sure.
sure. I just had another really basic question. When you mentioned the layers went in, do you mean but naturally, or was it like a with human intervention? You know, the
Oh,
different layers that went in.
um, did they mean the one under the enclosing wall?
Yeah, you had the
Maybe.
smaller stones and then the bigger stones on top, and you were saying that this layer went in after that layer.
Oh
I didn't.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, so that layer was there. So because it's underneath the enclosing wall, it was there before the enclosing wall
Okay.
went on
Yeah.
top.
Yeah.
Now, whether the layer was purposely put down to support the wall
Yes.
is possible to suggest that. But the layer itself, when we kind of were excavating it and taking it out, it was kind of, you know, the wall was potential to slip quite easily. So it's a little bit hard to know for sure, but we know just when you look at the sequence that that layer was placed down first, and then the wall came around on top of it afterwards.
Yeah.
But how long afterwards, it'll be interesting
But you
to.
don't know for sure whether it was placed by humans or would it
Oh,
naturally occur?
no,
Yeah.
no, it's placed by humans.
Oh yeah,
Sorry.
it was. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the layer, yeah, sorry, excuse me. So that layer, it wasn't like a natural layer
Okay.
built up. It wasn't, no, there was lots of what we'd say, what looks like to be nearly some of the stones are broken and shattered stones. There was loads of animal bone mixed into it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we had a lot of charcoal, and we did get a few artifacts in that layer as well. So that layer that was about 45 centimeters at its most now, that was at its most deepest, it actually sloped down. That layer was probably placed there by man. It could be what's waste, could be if it's depending on the period of time that comes back with, it could be just that it was dumped there and it's waste that's built up over time, or maybe it is a purposeful layer that they put in, but it's a man layer basically. It's got all, like, it's not natural anyway.
It's still fascinating to think the area being used
Oh yeah,
such a long
used,
period
well
of time
used. Yeah,
for
lots of stuff going on.
possibly various purposes. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll go on to the questions from the audience now. Jill Barrett has asked, are flexed burials because rigor mortis has set in before body could be straightened?
Oh, but that would be a really good question out to the osteologist. But what I understand is rigor mortis, it sets in, I don't, there's a bit of time between the rigor mortis, but then after, but actually it goes, the body goes limp again after rigor mortis as well, after a period of time. So that means that they are able to place the individual. So they have put the legs the way they wanted to. It's not that the individual went rigor mortis and they put them in. The body goes flex again after, I can't remember the
It was
length
a
of
very
time.
intentional kind of a position.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
very intentional position. Yeah.
yeah.
So I do know that because that came up actually. It came up as a question when we were digging, but rigor mortis happens, I can't remember the length of time, very shortly after, but then the body goes flex again. So you are
Okay.
able to actually move the individual into these positions. And what's very interesting about the legs, was that, as I said, the legs crossed over the knees again and again at the ankle, and which isn't very,
Yeah.
which they would have been able to do, and they kind of place them, and they're well able to kind of, there's a lot of talk gone into the way they've positioned these
Yeah.
individuals, and even to the point where what they dug into the ground to be able to fit them in as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And sorry, Jill is asked again, and what is the significance of the orientation / direction of the body and head? Thank
yeah, very good question, Jill. So east-west burials are normally, well, if you remember the extended burial, that's the one that's lying very flat, looks to be like a very Christian type, very Christian burial. So a lot of graveyards, the individuals will be lying in an east-west direction with the head to the west and feet to the east. So, but it's very hard to say. Like we do know that the individual with the flexed dates to that early Christian kind of the Christianity was around the time at that time. Not everybody there was still paganism, and not everybody had actually transitioned into Christianity. But like, I don't want to ever assume the religion of somebody who's been buried, but it's just the fact they're kind of they are in those east-west directions is significant to the burials, especially if we do look at other, when we'll be looking at the wider context of other medieval burials for this period of time. But the extended burial is what we would say would be very kind of Christian burial, but the flexed burial, there is medieval burials like that. So again, the positioning of that in the kind of just the fact they are aligned in that kind of east-west direction is significant. But we do know that we have medieval, so it's a bit hard because we do think that it is possible that the site might be classified as a furta, which is the sort of boundary burial sites, it's a community, like a family burial site, that sometimes they used earlier monuments to bury their dead. And that's what we're kind of possibly looking at, is that in that kind of at the beginning, during Christianity, and at that period of time of 8th, 9th century, before people started kind of going into graveyards, that people were still kind of, these familial burial sites were still being used. So I think that could be what we're looking at. And I don't want to say that the extended burial was a Christian burial and the flex burial was possibly a pagan burial, but we do know the theory, we do know from some of Elizabeth O'Brien's work, is that pagan people of the same family group maybe, and if these individuals are related, that would be really interesting to find out, because you do have 3 completely very different burials in a small area, and if they are all of the same date, it means that they're treating these three individuals got treated very differently for this period of time, where Christianity was nearly everybody was going to be Christian at that point in Ireland. So, but we do know from her work that pagans and Christians were buried together in these sort of family furtas, I think is what they're called.
And it's very hard to tell you now what the difference in times is between the flexed and the extended burials, right? You don't know that yet.
No, we don't know that yet. No,
Yeah.
we just know that the first flex burial we found is 8th, 9th century. So, so again, like medieval period, and obviously well into Christianity was quite well established in Ireland at that point, but not everybody at that period of time had changed into Christianity. So it will be, I'm going to just, so I don't want to say, oh, it probably is, because this site has taught me what I think is there is not what's there. And what we thought that burial was going to be has totally surprised us, because it did look like it could be a much earlier burial type. But again, it just kind of shows you. So I don't want to assume that all those 3 burials are of the same period of time until we get that confirmation. But again, that extended burial does look to be very kind of, most likely probably going to be of the same period of time to the first one. So it probably is, but it'll be interesting to see for sure.
And another thing that struck me while you were talking was the cairns. Like you didn't find any burial in the cairn itself.
The second one, yeah.
And so, like, I assumed all the, that was the purpose of the cairns. Am I wrong? Or isn't that what?
Oh, well, these are very small cairns now. Cairn, the term, when I say Now, when we just say that was only just a very small mound of stones.
Okay.
Not all, like when we say a cairn is just a term we use to describe a mound of stones.
Okay.
That's why, yeah, so these aren't cairns as in the big burial cairns that go back to the Neolithic period. I was just using cairn
As
just
a,
to describe it. It's just a mound of stones, basically.
okay.
But burial cairns then are those bigger monuments that you'd see up the mountains. So they're
And if we
different.
see really big cairns on top of the hills, are they
Yes,
quite likely to be burial sites?
yes, most likely to be burial sites. Yeah.
Okay. And
So
you'd imagine medieval again, or could they
no,
be
no, probably
even older?
prehistoric. No, no,
Prehistoric,
prehistoric.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
You're not going
um
near any of them.
I'm not going near those. No, not yet. Not for, I think I'll stick with these kind of hut sites for the moment because as I said, I've found a few more that would be worth kind of
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
investigating in different parts of the burn as well to see. But that's a few years away now at the
Yeah,
moment.
yeah.
So
Fantastic. There's another question from John. What did the people who lived there do? Farming with crops or cattle? What was the vegetation in the burn then? And has there been any pollen analysis done?
Yeah, I think there has been. I'm not great with the old pollen. I'm not up to date with the environmentals of the burn, but of the periods that we know that on my site was yes, farming was the key. That's what they were doing. They were all farmers, farmers in the Bronze Age, farmers in the medieval period. Really cattle herding, probably big in the medieval period, But yes, all farmers, and maybe that's my site, like from the Iron Age, might like as you were bringing up the pollen analysis, we do have good environmental material that will be sent for to look at the pollen and see what was growing in the area, and then the charcoal is being looked at as well to identify types of woods and stuff. So there will be a really interesting environmental side to the site as well. So but yes, I think that we're looking at just farmers, and maybe these are you see, I suppose it's just which period do I pick to talk about the
Yes.
Iron Age,
Yeah.
or and we just don't have a huge amount of Iron Age activity in the burn. So I don't want to speculate and say anything until we get and we get confirmation or the other pits actually Iron Age as well, and what activity is found in those. But I'd say you're probably looking at these burials being the burials most likely definitely probably from the farmers of the area, very close, probably living very close, you know what I mean? So yeah, so definitely farmers.
Okay. Helena has asked, thanks, Elaine. I really enjoyed being part of the excavation last year. Do you think the burials were Furta burials? Don't know what they mean.
Yeah, well, we'll just wait to get the radiocarbon dates.
Okay, okay.
But yes, that's look, I'm reading myself about, I suppose, I'm learning myself. The site has taught me a lot, and I'm kind of doing a bit of the research in the background for them. And it just seems when I got that radiocarbon date for the flex burial as being that 8th, 9th century, I threw me into a whole new period of time, and I really found myself kind of delving into Elizabeth O'Brien's book. And so I do think we could be looking at possibly what seems to be might be a Furta that just, but again, it might have been a monument that was there from the Iron Age that they reused in the medieval period for burying, for obviously burying the family burials kind of plots, site. So I do think that we possibly are looking at a Furta, but I would love to have the confirmation of the extended burial and then obviously the other flexed burial, because again, even though there's two flex burials on the site, they are different. And the pit that flex burial in was quite well dug into the ground. It was quite deep. So I don't want to assume, I know like, oh, they probably are, but they may not be of the same time. And the soil that came from that pit was different. There was just there was a lot of organic, kind of possibly organic material in that pit as well. So it'll be just really interesting to see. I don't want to speculate anything at the moment, but come back to me pretty soon. I'll
Yes,
get the
yeah, yeah. We'll
dates.
have to
And
do
if
this again
and if
when,
all three burials are of the same period, that 8th, 9th century, or is one slightly different,
yeah,
I
yeah.
can't really say until I get the evidence. And I
Yes.
and as I said, I speculate, and then I find out I'm wrong because what I
Yeah.
assume to go in, and I'm like, I'm so sure that this
Yes.
is it, and then oh no, it's completely not. And that's it. That's what's amazing about archaeology is that sometimes you think you know something and then it always surprises you. So, I don't want to run ahead of myself just yet
No.
until I'm
A
just
bit
trying
of
to say to
suspense is
myself,
good.
just wait.
We'll just
Oh,
all have to
trust
wait
me.
till
I'm mad to find out and I'm mad to speculate, but I just say to myself, just it's coming, it's
Yeah,
coming very soon. So,
great. Thank you,
they
Elaine.
can get in touch with me in a few weeks, end of March, I think they've said. So it's just everything's delayed up in the
Okay.
grid.
You'll have a few emails in
Anyway,
your inbox at the end of March.
yeah, I'll share it, I
Valerie has
promise.
asked, thank you so much for allowing me to work on the site nearly a year later, and I'm still excited by it. Is there any significance that one half of the outside had no activity and the other C56 had heavy activity? Lots of animal
Yeah.
being exposed.
Yeah, well, well, I mean, I suppose that we'd excavated two trenches, and it's kind of like, oh, what's on the other quadrant, you know? Yeah, well, it just means that yeah, I don't really know what to say. It's just we did find a lot of lithics at the north exterior, but again, but what I mean is, like, I suppose that we just had this strange activity on the eastern side that we didn't have north or south or on the western side. We did find a good bit of lithics outside the enclosure, but not in the way, nothing like this layer that we had on the eastern side. So that is concentrated to the eastern side. Um, what is it doing? Is it some sort of ramp up? Is it an access route on into the enclosure that maybe there isn't an entrance? Do you know what I mean? Maybe it's just this is kind of some sort of like those flats that now I don't want to say I kind of say flat slabs. They're not really like I don't want you thinking
Yeah.
a beautiful surface of, like you might find in a medieval floor or something,
Yeah.
but they were there and they were on there kind of flat, do you know what I mean? Kind of a little bit higgledy-piggledy. But again, and they were kind of ramping up and they did go under the stones. So that means that they were laid down before those large boulders were put around the enclosing wall. So is it some sort of an access that they accessed on the eastern side into the site? You know? I think that,
It's
yeah,
tempting to think like that, isn't it? It's like,
it is
yeah,
tempting,
yeah,
yeah, and it kind of and why that side and not the rest of the site, do you know what I
yeah,
mean? But again, like to be able to look at it then through the radiocarbon dates, we'll have a lot of material to send to be radiocarbon date and to see where stuff sequences in into the different periods, that'll tell us a good bit. We may never be able to answer completely those questions, and it may be this and it might be that sometimes, and maybe we'll never find the answers until we dig more of
yeah.
maybe I don't know.
To get an overall picture.
Yeah.
Micheline has asked, is it common to have several areas of use back at least to Bronze Age on the one side?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not yeah, like even at Connell, Michelle Comer excavating there has Bronze Age lithics, and I think she's got a good bit of periods of use. I don't know if she's any Iron Age dates, but she definitely has what looks like to be lithics of the Bronze Age. So that means that there was Bronze Age habitation there. And then, like, you got to think about people like to probably go back to the same spot, when you're picking
Yeah,
you know what I mean, where you're living, you're probably going to live on top of where somebody else actually probably were living as well. Do you know what I mean? People seem to, they do that a lot. We do find in archaeology that you would have multiple different periods left practically living in the same spot and on top of each other. So sometimes archaeology, when you find a multi-period of site, is what we call them, is that it's got more than one period of site and might even have 3 or 4 different periods together, all living in the same area, so looking at Michelle Comer's site will be quite significant to what we have here on our site, and she does have bronze lithics as well. So it just means that maybe the Bronze Age activity and whatever habitation they had left behind might have just gotten cleared out. And then the Iron Age came along. Do you know what I mean? And then maybe, they cleared it out then when the medieval burials came in. So sometimes it can be hard with some of our artifacts. You can see them there. Some of our artifacts are hard. It's hard to tell what the spindle whorl dates to, because you get Bronze Age spindle whorls and you get them used right through the medieval period as well. So maybe some of the artifacts we mightn't be able to date for sure, because we don't necessarily they weren't necessarily found in a nice pit, you know what I mean, in a nice layer that we can securely date. They were kind of found in mixtures of layers that we had on the site. So it does suggest that like that, the lithics, we had a concentration of lithics outside the structure, but we found a few lithics inside. But we don't, like, I don't think that, I think it's just that they were there and then maybe people had come in and just living on top of what was already there. But I don't know if we'll find, I don't want to say maybe the pits could be, but I think at the moment we're looking at Iron Age pits. I don't know if we'll actually find any Bronze Age layers or activity. I think everything kind of could be a bit mixed in, but getting more radiocarbon dates will tell us a lot more. But it'll be great for the lithics, because lithic specialists are kind of, they're well able to kind of, based on the different types of finds, they're able to kind of date them pretty close. The copper tweezers could be Iron Age, could be medieval. I mean, there's lots of medieval tweezers. So again, that needs to go to a specialist. And then the spiral ring. So what they'll be able to do, specialists will look at the artifacts and be able to hopefully fit them into different periods based on different styles. And then maybe some of the artifacts, it just won't be possible to do that. And we just may not be 100% certain what period they came from, because as I said, we didn't really get, we got a lot of artifacts in like the rubbled area on the inside of the structures, not from just from like the layers that we found inside that we can't date for certain, you know, because there's just a mixture of finds found together. So
it's incredible to think the amount of work that goes in even to get a very simple discovery, and you know, people who are not at it just want very simple quick answers.
Oh no, I know, yeah, no, and oh God, and archaeology is all about time,
yeah,
and you know what I mean, and it's every, you know what I mean, it's kind of, I suppose we're digging back into time, that, and then these things just take time to come out, you know, like all the different aspects and all the different specialists now that we've got lined up for the next stage. And then I have to make sure all the materials prepped and ready to go. So each bit will have a story to tell, and hopefully it's something that will give us, you know, and then who knows, in the future, you know, future archaeologists might come back and review it, and things always change in archaeology as well. So
absolutely, it's wonderful still to get the update that you're able to give, Elaine. We'll try and wrap up now with just the final question. Helena, I'll ask you two questions at a time. Helena has asked, will you be doing more excavations in 2025? And Deborah is asking, what is your interpretation of the site based on what you know today? So maybe if you want to summarize about what you feel about the site and tell us what your plans are for 2025.
Moving straight into post-ex. Yeah, the stuff is, so interpretation at the moment is exactly what I've said today. We have stuff that looks like it's from the Bronze Age. It looks like we possibly have Iron Age pits on the site. And I think, and I'm focusing in on, I don't mean to be like focusing in on those. And then there's just this burial component that kind of is different at the site. So there's so many aspects that I think that the Iron Age is going to be massive, quite significant to the Burren if we do get more Iron Age dates, because we just don't know much about the Iron Age in the Burren area. So I think that they'll have a really brilliant story to tell about the site. You know, when the enclosing wall went in, I'm not too sure I'll ever know for certain, but I'm very much looking forward to dating that layer underneath and to start being able to piece the site together. But I think at the moment we are looking at Iron Age pits, and then we're looking at a whole different period of time where the medieval period came in and burials were placed on the site. So it's a different, two different kind of completely different type of sites within the one. Maybe I think that that's what we're looking at, Iron Age activity with a burial component to the site, you know.
Very good. So in 2025 is going to be a lot of analysis, but you're not going digging this year.
No, I'm afraid not.
Yeah.
No, what has to happen is the Royal Irish Academy, they fund you for 3 years excavating, and then they want you to wrap everything up within those, you know, to wrap.
Yes.
Once I get material off to be published, I will apply again for more funding, hopefully, to do more. So, but I don't think there'll be any, there'll be nothing major excavating in 2025, I'm afraid. But I will run some post-ex. So if people do want to come and volunteer for a day or two, we will be processing some of those samples with Mary Dillon, and we'll be learning about that sort of stuff and learning how to label artifacts to go to the museum and things like that. So there is actually, I'll be doing post-ex if people do want to get involved. I'll run a few sessions if you'd like to come and see, and to see the kind of processes that happen, you know,
Yeah.
and
Makes
get
it
all ready to
makes
go to
it
the
even more
museum as well.
special. The people who are lucky enough to be at the excavation and to be part of this. So
Yeah,
really, really special. And thanks, Elaine, for
no
explaining
worries.
all
Well,
so
thanks for
well to
having
us.
me.
Yeah. Have a very good night, and thank you again, Elaine.
Great. Thanks a million.
Bye.